What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Space City X Files. This is Rick, and thank you for listening to today's episode. Episode 8 is about a Taiwanese man living in New York, and for most of his life, he was enjoying the American dream. He had the liberty to work and earn a living, and he also had a nice, quiet home in Queens, New York that he can call his own. Now, those two liberties might seem simple to some, living in a country where people mostly have more than what they need. But for most Americans and people all over the world, really, they work their whole lives just for the opportunity to enjoy them. For some, being a homeowner may never be a possibility. This one man's fortune would soon turn to despair when his house is stolen from underneath him by scammers, and when he turns to the very people appointed in this country to protect him, he's turned away and then has his life threatened. After this, he makes a YouTube video pretty much saying if he dies, he knew who the murderer would be. He fights with all his means to gain answers as to why this is allowed to happen to him, but in the end, his investigation would indeed lead to his death, and under very suspicious circumstances. This is Conspiracy, the death of Sunny Shue. Now, before we get going, let me try and pay some bills really quick. The Space City X-Files appreciates you being here today, and we thank you for your support. If you would like to become a supporter of the show, there are 3 ways to do that, and I'll give you those details now. 1, if you would like to become a member of the show and gain access to unreleased material, bloopers, extra full episodes, free merchandise, then visit our website and click on the Patreon tab. And there you can sign up for a $5 or $10 a month membership and gain access to these perks. 2, if you're not quite ready for our monthly membership, that's okay. If you would like to just buy us a cup of coffee or a beer, you can click on the Support Us with a Tip tab on the website, and there you can type in whatever amount your heart compels you to give. Now, please understand that we are dedicated to upping the quality of our show, so whatever monetary support we receive goes directly back into the program. 3, the other way to support the show is whatever platform you're listening on. Leave us a written review on what you thought. Whether you loved the show or hated it, your feedback helps us greatly. One last plug, the store website is live now, so if you want to wear what the pros wear and look like a complete badass, it's all there for your purchase. So just mosey over to the website and click on the merch tab. You can purchase it there. All right, so just to give you a summary of how this episode will play out, we'll look at who Sunny Shue was, then the details of the incident, next what people say happened, and finally what we theorized may have happened. So, who was Sunny Shue? His full name was Sunming Shue, but he preferred to go by the name Sunny for short. Shue was described as a humble and generous man, but when faced with adversity, he had another side that can show up. And that side was very persistent and bold. As a Taiwanese immigrant who came to the United States legally, he made exceptional progress while he was here and strived with great effort to obtain a piece of the American pie that everyone talks about. And that's exactly what Sunny was able to do. He worked hard as a software engineer and was even working on a side project that would help Chinese-speaking people connect through a social site. Well, around 1993, all his hard work pays off, and he's able to make a huge accomplishment by becoming a homeowner. He purchases a humble 2,000 square foot home located at 4514 158th Street in Queens, New York, and without a doubt, he was overjoyed. Now, it's reported that Shue had no relatives in the United States besides his brother, who would spend a lot of time in Taiwan. So, because he had the extra rooms, he would rent them out to other Asian immigrants to help them have a place to stay while they got themselves together. And this is a testimony to the compassion Shue had. And up until this point, Sunny really had it together. In 2000, he sees a chance to lower his interest rate on his home if he refinances it in his brother's name, so he does it. And this is where the trouble starts for poor Sunny. Shortly after the refinance in 2001, Shue falls victim to a straw buyer scam. And for this to happen, there has to be people involved in high up places. Now, typically a straw buyer scam would involve a fictitious person who forges documents in order to obtain a mortgage under false pretenses. In Sunny's case, a woman named Amy Shue conspired with a mortgage broker who worked with the previous refinancing to forge a power of attorney document that falsely contained Sunny's brother's name. With that false document, the thieves sold Sunny's house right out from underneath them, with the new owner obtaining a mortgage from a company named Syntex Home Equity with Old Republic title handling the deed work. Now, Sunny has no freaking clue what just transpired. And it's not until a Syntex Bank representative comes to his house one day and says that he's there to inspect the home for the new owners. That's actually how Sunny finds out what happened. And can you imagine that? You're at your house, someone shows up asking to inspect it for the new owners. No, you're not. So, anyways, Shue politely as possible tells them they're wrong and to F off. So the banker heads back to the lab to see what the hell actually happened. And in the meantime, Shue immediately starts sending letters to Syntex Home Equity. He sends a letter to Old Republic Title, and he notifies the police about the obvious fraud that has taken place. So he meets with two NY detectives and New York detectives, and they tell him that if he can get proof, for example, the supposed forged documents and testimony from his brother, then they can put the deadbeats in jail. And Shue does just that. You know, it turns out his brother wasn't even in the country the date the documents were signed. So the fraudsters are busted and locked away. Now, with everything being brought to light, you figure the case would end here, right? Well, unfortunately, we can't say that's what happened. And this would be like the shortest episode ever, too, if that were the case. Afterwards, Shue thinks everything is back to normal, so he starts sending in his payments. But month after month, they get returned with a note saying that there's no such account with his name on it. And this is not a good omen. Then, surprisingly, in December of 2001, Syntex Home Equity files a lawsuit against Shue and the fraud owner, Amy Shue, with the state Supreme Court in Queens County, asking for the state to enter a default judgment and foreclosure on the property because the owners, Amy Shue, supposedly, were default on the mortgage agreement. And this is important to mention. If you think Syntex didn't know about the fraud case with the home, they did. Okay? They absolutely knew. They just didn't care. And so the case of Syntex versus Shue enters the state Supreme Court in Judge Joseph Galia's courtroom, and immediately Sunny appeals for an order to show cause. And this is in response to Syntex's claim. Now, if you're not familiar with the legal terminology, what this does is it allows time for him to gather his defense, and it will also force Syntex Home into having to prove the sale to Amy Shue was legal, which they would not be able to do. And so Sunny comes in here thinking that he's got a slam dunk case. I mean, it's pretty much, and pretty much any person hearing the case with a functional brain would be able to see it the same way. I mean, this was a fraud case. Shockingly, though, Judge Galia allows the case to proceed, and check this out. Not only does he allow an obvious fraud case to proceed, he denies Sunny the opportunity to bring in the detectives who busted the people who actually committed the fraud, and he ignores all documentation of the forged documents. Now, this is absolutely devastating to Sunny's case, and it eventually leads to his foreclosure and his eviction in January of 2005. And that's not it, though. With nothing in their way now, Syntex Home Equity buys out the fraud owner, Amy Shue, who is out of jail, by the way, with the slap on the wrist. I mean, they didn't even get any time, her or her co-conspirator. And for $1,000, Syntex Homes is now the legal owners of the property. Now, it's worth mentioning, looking at the home's value in 2005, it would have been worth over $300,000 and probably would have sold for around $500,000. And that's one hell of $1,000 investment. With all this happening, it's hard not to see it as suspicious, right? Well, let me continue. To me, doing the investigation and reading over the documents, it immediately starts to look like a big wealthy company appeals to a judge with big time lawyers who possibly have ties to each other in the area, and they see this Taiwanese American man with poor English and limited means to defend himself, and they take him for an easy target. I mean, basically just try to railroad him and think, what's he going to do? Thinking he'll likely just go away. Well, they seriously misjudged Sunny Shue. He didn't go away. And Sunny has already been fighting this battle since 2001. It's now 2005 when the first foreclosure happens. In total, it would be a 10-year battle for Sunny until the tragic ending. So let's continue. In 2005, after the first foreclosure, Sunny doesn't give up. He files for appeal and appeals again, and is still faced with a Judge Galea who will not allow Sunny to admit any evidence that would prove fraud happened. I mean, Sunny even has the guilty pleas that Amy Shue and her co-conspirator entered when they got busted. Still, he was not allowed a fair chance. On top of this, the time between trials, because of all the postponements, is taking a toll on Sunny's finances. It's really hard not to overlook how fast Judge Galea pushed the initial trial through that led to Syntex Home gaining ownership, but in the appeals, he grants reset after reset to Syntex for unknown reasons. And you think Syntex Homes minds the time it takes between these resets? I think not. Either way, the home's value is just increasing year after year, so even if the case took, let's say 10 years, when it sold, they would still reap the benefit. I mean, all they paid were $1,000 for it. So when Sunny finally gets his day back in court, he's dealt another crushing blow from an all too familiar opponent. Judge Galea again denies any admittance of Sunny's proof and again rules in favor of Syntex Homes. At this point, if Sunny decided to throw in the towel and walk away, I don't think anybody would blame him. But he forges on. He starts to write letters to any official that will listen and to Judge Galea himself, pleading for relief from this injustice. He writes a letter to the New York State Administrative Judge, a man named Jonathan Lippman, kind of trying to take it one step above Judge Galea's head, but it's unknown what effect this had. I mean, Judge Jonathan Lippman happens to be the one who actually appointed Galea his judgeship. So there's that. I mean, Sunny continues writing into elected officials, though this is where he starts to gain a little traction, okay? So it's thought, possibly, that Sunny became a bit of a thorn in the side of Galea. And maybe some high-up people started to ask a few questions about the case. It's not 100% clear, though. Now, what Sunny wanted all along was Judge Galea to recuse himself from the case so Sunny could have the matter brought up in another judge's courtroom, and this would probably give him a shot at a fair trial. Judge Galea completely refuses to do this. However, possibly because of Sunny's letter writing, he does reverse his initial foreclosure decision. But he still won't hear any evidence or make Syntex prove how they gained ownership, but he decides to reverse his decision? So, great, right? This is a win. Sadly, no. It's actually just a tactical way to arrive at the same conclusion. Judge Galea's ruling is that this case did contain some sort of fraud, and the initial foreclosure ruling will be reversed. However, Syntex Home Equity has already paid off Sunny's delinquent balance on the home, so they will maintain ownership under a term that is known as equitable subrogation. Now, if you're wondering what the hell is equitable subrogation, I got you. Don't worry about it. And we're going to call it ES. ES is defined as follows. a legal principle that allows a party to make payments to another party in order to collect damages from a debtor to the second party. So, to further clarify, Sunny owed money to an original bank for his mortgage, and this caused the lien to be on the title. The home was then sold, and then Syntech states that they are the current owners. So what they do is they pay off the original lien holders, pay off that balance to become the sole owner with a clean title. Okay, so there's no more liens on there. They have a clean title. They're the owners of that house. And this is what Judge Galea tells Sunny. And Sunny's like, what the hell? How can this be? How can equitable subrogation apply to stolen property? Sunny is quoted saying, this means that if I have a lot of money, like Syntex Homes, I could just go pay off anyone's mortgage without them knowing about it and take ownership and kick them out. I mean, I was blown away too when I heard this part of the case. I mean, this poor man can't catch a break. And the really sick part is Syntex Home Equity knew exactly what was going on. The amount of greed it must take to just go along with it all. And in case you're wondering, Syntex Equity Homes never made a statement about the case, even after being asked repeatedly by different sources. Yeah. Let's continue the story. So, this ruling came in late 2008, and all Sunny can do is file an appeal and continue his letter writing. It's noteworthy to say that at this point his finances have been depleted, and he's simply representing himself now whenever he has to file an appeal or make an appearance or file a motion. He's basically doing it himself because he ain't got no more money. At this point, though, Judge Galea has had enough of him, so all Sunny's request to have another court date or to enter evidence is just plain denied or ignored. In January of 2009, Shue decides to write a letter and deliver it directly to Judge Galea's mailbox, and the letter stated as followed. And this is quoted directly from Sunny. It's over 8 years. We have been prohibited to have any New York CPLR basic due process to discovery, to deposition, to subpoena, to counterclaim, to cross-claim, and again, and our third-party summon has been ignored too. After contacted NYPD Commissioner Mr. Raymond W. Kelly and Lieutenant Comerforty and the 109 agreed that Detective Keith Ng and Detective Ken Lee, who investigated the crime, should testify to you about the bank officers and closing lawyer violated law, and the bank's closing lawyer internationally accepted fake deposit of residential contract of sales, fake check, falsify bank records to endorse the fraudulent mortgage, and got some money for himself. There are no reasons you free all the criminals, $0 of judgment at all. Would you mind to set a hearing as soon as possible? End quote. That was the end of Sunny's letter. So, this pissed Judge Galea off, to say the least. I mean, granted, you can't go around putting stuff into people's mailbox. That was definitely a no-no on Sunny's part, but, I mean, come on, man. Desperate times, sometimes it calls for desperate measures, but this also brought a lot of heat on him. So, 1 week later, on the 14th of January, Sunny is summoned to the Queens Supreme Courthouse. Once there, he's met in the lobby by two detectives from the Queens District Attorney's Bureau, and they tell him they want to talk to him about his case. So Sunny's like, okay, and he sits on a bench and says, let's talk. But the detectives had other plans. According to Sunny, the detective shows him his gun and his badge and tells Sunny to follow him outside. The detectives then take Sunny to an unmarked car, and they drive him to the district attorney's office, where he's escorted in through a back door entrance and locked in a small waiting room to hear what this is all about. When the detectives return, they begin to basically interrogate him, using intimidation tactics, screaming and banging on the desk. Sunny recalls one detective becoming so angry, he slams his hand down on the desk in front of him and screams in his face, "That house does not belong to you anymore." During the barrage, they removed all of his documents that Sunny had on him and made photocopies of every paper that was in Sunny's possession. Now, if Sunny for some reason didn't understand why this was happening to him, it became clear when the detectives started to warn him about leaving Judge Galea alone. They accused Sunny of harassing him. They claimed that they know he put a letter in Judge Galea's mailbox, so without a doubt now, this happened at Galea's request. This continues for 2 whole hours, and before they let Sunny go, they make an unnerving statement. They tell Sunny that if he goes to the press or writes to anyone about what happened there today, quote, he lives in a very dangerous neighborhood in Queens with dangerous gangs, and if he's not careful, anything can happen to him, end quote. Sunny immediately gets the notion, and his heart sinks into his stomach. Shortly after he's released, notably shaken according to associates. But what did I tell you earlier about the spirit of Sunny Shue? I mean, he's not scared, okay? Sunny said, basically, the hell with them. So he notifies the FBI about the incident, and he also right away contacted a company, a news station called Black Star News, which are the brave journalists who originally covered this whole ordeal. Without a doubt now, I mean, Shue realizes how deep this corruption runs, and here he makes a plan to investigate Judge Galea himself, so he's not backing down. And this is no longer a coincidence. This is political corruption, and something has to be done about it. And this is really sad, too, because after Shue left the interrogation, he stated to his associate, who was trying to help him out, a man named Will Gallison, who happened to be an activist also fighting against corruption in New York at the time. Shue was quoted saying that in China, they would have just put a bullet in my head. But in America, justice always wins. You just have to fight. And that's what Shue believed. And that's why we're sharing this story. That's why I ask all of you to make this story known, please. I hope that somehow we can give Shue his deserved justice. So now Sunny starts attending corruption meetings, like trying to expand his network of people who may be able to help him, while also beginning his investigation into Galea's finances, which are public records because he's an elected official. And here he finds something interesting. This is another area where they misjudged Sunny Shue, because as much as they tried to play him as a dumb immigrant, it turns out that he was pretty damn smart and a whiz with anything computers. And this was paramount in his computer searches of public records. It was on November 29th of 2009 when Shue informs Janice Howard, director of the New York OCA Ethics Commission, that Judge Joseph Galea is in failure to disclose a great deal about his personal finances. According to Shue's findings, Galea has left out a mortgage held in his wife's name, Rosalie Greco, by HSBC Bank, a mortgage held jointly by Joseph and Rosalie Galea, again by HSBC Bank, failed to disclose his wife's income, failed to disclose a Hampton Beach house worth millions of dollars, and failed to disclose a potential conflict of interest by holding stock in Flushing Financial Corp., a contact that he could have possibly used to receive a much lower interest rate on a mortgage he held that would have likely cost anyone else a difference of about $300,000. And it's worth it to note that he kept these discrepancies to himself, Galea did, since he started his position, which was 8 years already. Something that also struck me as odd is the many accounts held by the HSBC Bank. Now, if you don't know who they are, the full name is Hong Kong Shanghai Bank Corporation, a bank that in 2012 was found guilty of many accounts of money laundering for the cartels. Is there corruption there? I don't know. I just find it odd. So, let's just say that these were pretty serious. So much that the director of the OAC, Janice Howard, pretty much said, "Yo, Judge, you got one last chance to come clean and set the record straight before we dive in ourselves." Now, if the judge did not clarify the issues that Sunny brought up and the OAC found out in their investigation, Galea would be facing some prison time for sure. I mean, that's the whole reason these panels are in place, right? That's why they're there, to make sure people who sit in powerful positions stay honest. So now Galea knows for sure that Shue has been poking around in his finances, and this leaves Sunny on an all-new level of alert. So he arranges a meeting with the FBI agent assigned to his case, an agent named Rachel Rojas from the New York division. Now, at this meeting, Shue has his associates with them, including Will Gallison, and they're pretty much just reiterating the threats against his life. And I'm sure they bring up what happened at the OAC and that Galea for sure knows Shue has dug into his background. To me, this was like them saying, hey, don't forget about Shue because it could get really worse from here shortly. And Agent Rojas assures Sunny that she's monitoring the case and to stay in contact with any updates. So this had to be somewhat reassuring to Sunny. I mean, and he doesn't stop with the FBI. It's reported that he reached out to many organizations, including a former captain of the NYPD who had at the time been advocating against corruption himself. So this last year had to have been like a whirlwind for Shue. I mean, the case went from hopelessness to having substantial evidence of corruption, which could lead to the thing that he wanted the most in the world, which was just to have his home back. The next big break in the case would come soon, but Shue realizes his life is at an all-time high risk. So on April 9, 2010, he creates a video with the help of Gallison stating that if something happens to him, look at Judge Galea and his men. And we have an actual clip of that. So what we're going to do is we're going to play that now for you. Sit tight.
Hi, my name is Sunny Shue. I have filed a complaint to the FBI and the New York State Unified Court EC Committee about the Judge Joseph Gloria falsified his financial disclosure statement. And I have submitted evidence to the FBI. Recently, FBI returned me a copy of the evidence that I sent to the FBI. Okay, and today, April 9th, Unified Court EC Committee Director Janice Hoover, she told me Judge Joseph Gloria already amended his financial disclosure statement. It means my evidence is true. At least he was supposed to amend misrepresentation on his financial disclosure statement. And for the security issue, for the security concern, I make this recording. And if anything wrong goes to me, it should be come from Judge Gloria and his people, because before I have been kidnapping by his people, by his and threatened and intimidated by his people, not file a complaint against Judge Gloria. So I make this recording for the safety, for the protection. If anything wrong, please go to the Judge Gloria and his people. Thanks.
Okay, and these videos we're gonna put the in the show notes also, and I recommend you just go take a look at them. You know, if this case speaks to you, and you want to be involved or see the details, then go check these out, please. All right, so people don't just make videos like that for no reason. He knew what was going on, and the reports we have of the threats are just what Shue made known to his associates. I can almost guarantee you that there were incidents that he kept to himself. So skip forward to June 23rd, 2010, and the OAC office informs that the judge they tell Shue that the judge amended his disclosure form, and it's been submitted. And this is the moment Sunny has been waiting for. So Shue heads to the office with his two friends as eyewitnesses, and that's Will Gallison and Dr. Sherry Bobrovsky. And when he gets there, he's handed Judge Galea's amended forms, and nothing has changed at all. The only thing Galea included was a lot in Queens, a vacant lot that he claims is worth less than $1,000, so it's not required for admittance. Shue, seeing this, that nothing has changed, exclaims out loud, "Now I've got him. Now I've got evidence to put Galea in jail." Now, his friend Gallison had been recording up until that point to document the whole thing, but as soon as Shue had said that out loud, he says that you can feel all the eyes in the rooms just leering at Shue and his associates. Gallison knew that this was not good and immediately took Shue by the arm and whisked him outside, thanking everyone for their time on the way out. Outside, the trio went over the implications of these events that just happened, and Sherry and Will warned Sunny again to use the utmost caution these next few days. Now, Shue promised that he would stick close to his home and would alert them immediately should he feel like something was wrong. 3 days later, on June 26, 2010, Will Gallison gets a phone call with Sunny's name popping up on the caller ID. Will answers it expecting to hear Sunny Shue, but it's not. On the other end of the line, it's Officer Ramos with the 109th Precinct calling to say that Sunny had been found in a coma with severe head trauma and had been transported to the New York Hospital of Queens. Officer Ramos stated that he found Sunny Shue's speed dial list and just started calling everyone there, telling them to come to the hospital so they can make an identification. Before we go any further, I'd like to add that Shue was found unresponsive at the address of 1821 130th Street in Queens, and this would have been a good 15 minutes away from his house. We posted in the show notes the Google map links for that area, and you can see that it's basically like a dead-end industrial type area, and it's almost across, well, it actually basically is right across from the famous Rikers Island. Now, Shue wasn't a naive man. He knew the magnitude of the situation he was in, and he promised that he would stay close to his house. Why would he be in that area at all? Moving forward, so Gallison calls Bobrovsky, who also already received a call from Officer Ramos, and asked if she could come pick him up so they can go together, which she does. And before they walk into the hospital, Gallison uploads Sunny Shue's previously recorded video to YouTube, and he also turns on his iPhone camera and positions it in his pocket so he can record everything that happens going forward, kind of like a body cam. So they go in and are greeted by a Dr. Zashin Ahmed and an ER nurse named Laura. And they break the news, saying the nurse and the doctor, Zashin, says, "We're sorry, we already covered him up. He passed away at 8:13, and that's the time of death." Now, Will and Sherry arrived at 8:15. They're in complete shock. And they're asked by Dr. Ahmed to verify the identity of Sunny, which they do. And shortly after the ID, Dr. Sherry Bobrovsky asked Dr. Ahmed about the severe head trauma that Officer Ramos had mentioned to both of them in their phone calls. And we have the clip of how that conversation went, recorded by Will's cell phone. So let me play that for you.
So we got a CAT scan of his head. He's got a massive bleed throughout his brain. It's called a subarachnoid hemorrhage.
And did you relieve the pressure?
No.
Why?
So, first of all, this wasn't traumatic, most likely. There's no signs of trauma on his head. There's no fractures. So what this probably was an aneurysm that burst.
He was jogging. I was told he was jogging.
Yeah.
So he had to fall and hit his head.
Not necessarily.
He doesn't have a head injury.
You can't come to that conclusion.
He doesn't have
any signs of injuries. If he
Nothing.
fell,
if he had fallen and hit his head hard enough to give him a bleed like that,
he would have had
we would
some
have seen
kind of
something on his skull. There is nothing.
Yeah.
Not a scratch.
There's not a scratch on his head.
Not a lump, not a bump, nothing.
All right. So You see here that Dr. Ahmed and the ER nurse both state that he did not have a scratch on his head, right? He didn't have anything. Y'all heard that. Not a lump, not a bump. And, they basically already came to a determination of what it was. He had an aneurysm. And it's important to note that Shue didn't have any prior medical history. Okay, he was healthy. He was a healthy man. He jogged every day. And so if he didn't have any scratches on his head or he wasn't bleeding and there was no sign of trauma, then why did Officer Ramos, a trained, seasoned officer, say that he had severe head injuries? When Sherry and Will asked this question and informed the doctors about the situation Shue was having in his life, Dr. Ahmed promised that he would go back and double check, which he probably never did. He probably just told them that just to get the two of them out of there. Now, Nurse Laura hands Shue's cell phone and a plastic evidence bag and then leaves. Now, this is very odd, too, because that pretty much means that there's no criminal investigation going on whatsoever. It's like they know for absolutely positive that Shue died from natural causes. And because that's the only time a hospital or police will release personal belongings. So Dr. Ahmed and Nurse Laura say there was not a scratch on poor Sunny's head. Well, let me play you some 911 calls that night of people that called in. And if you play extra close attention, you're going to hear somebody in the background that says he's bleeding. All right? So sit tight. I'm going to play those for you right now. Pay really close attention here.
911 operator 2003 emergency.
How you doing? There's a gentleman over here. He's laid out right now. He's not saying anything. He's just laying over here.
What's the address? Where's he at?
I'm over on 1821 130th Street.
130th Street. What borough is this in?
Queens.
You know what two cross streets this is between?
It's between 20th Avenue and 18th Avenue.
He's laying out in the street. Is he
Yeah,
responding?
No, he's breathing, but he's not saying anything. His eyes are open. He's blinking.
Okay. What's the telephone number you're calling from? All right, just need you to hold on. I'm going to connect to EMS. Hold on line, please.
You on hold.
Hold on the line, please.
EMS 8740.
8740-2003. What's on to Queens?
Queens call ambulance for you or someone else? Hello?
Hello. There's a gentleman. He's laid out on the floor right now.
Is he breathing?
He is breathing. His eyes are open. He's awake, but he's not saying anything.
Okay, how old is he about?
Roughly 40s, 50s,
40s?
between 40 and 50.
Okay, does he appear maybe intoxicated?
No, I don't think so.
Possibly on drugs or alcohol maybe?
No, I don't think so.
No, he's just lying on the ground?
Yes, he's breathing lightly, but
we don't know what's wrong with him?
No.
No? Breathing. All right, this is Queens at 18-21 130th Street?
Yes, it's in between 18th Avenue.
18th Avenue and 20th Avenue.
20th Avenue and 130th Street.
All right.
Yes.
All right, is he bleeding or are you seeing any injuries? No blood or anything? Sir? Hello? Hello? Did he hang up, AC?
No, he's still there, but I guess it's a bad phone connection.
Oh, okay, lying on the ground. Thank you, AC.
Alrighty.
Did you catch that? Well, no, I did. You hear somebody in the background say, bleeding. Well, I mean, if a frantic civilian can spot head trauma at nighttime, you're telling me that 2 ER professionals can't? Something is not adding up here. And here's something else that just doesn't smell right about that night. Documents obtained through the Freedom of Information Act from the hospital shows that at 9:03 p.m., a detective, Amy Davidson from the 109th, shows up just minutes after Sherry and Will leave the building. And she has a long talk with Dr. Ahmed and Nurse Laura. Now, why is this? If there was no sign of trauma, and Officer Ramos was just mistaken, since everyone there says for sure that there was no foul play involved, what was the need for a detective to pay a visit to the good doctor and his nurse? I mean, even the 109th captain was positive that there was no foul play, and this guy didn't even see Sunny's body. He didn't even go to the hospital. He's sitting at his desk, doing God knows what, playing solitaire. And look, let me tell you what happened. So before Detective Davison arrived at the hospital, Sherry had walked outside and actually called the 109th precinct and asked to talk to the captain of the precinct, which was a man named Chris Austin. And she actually requested a detective come and investigate what happened. And what did Chris say? He said, "Oh, there's no need. There's no need for that." Austin stated that his detectives have already confirmed that there was no foul play because they spoke with the witness at the scene, who says he saw Sunny there and Sunny just fell over and died. But no head trauma, though. Okay? Chris Austin says there was no head trauma. Apparently, Sunny just glided safely to the floor and died where he laid. And this whole statement by Austin is just complete shit. I mean, you can tell. And here's the eerie part. He tells Sherry that Shue died of an aneurysm. The very same statement the doctor gave. So is this a coincidence? I think not. Now, if you think this is wacky, just wait, there's more. The next event just reeks of cover-up. So the next morning, Sherry receives a call from the hospital asking her to come back up there and re-identify Shue's body because the correct paperwork had not been signed. And they add, "Oh, yeah, and please bring that phone we gave you back up, too, so it can go to the next of kin." Only Shue had no next of kin in the United States. So Sherry informs them that neither she or Will be able to make it up there until Wednesday, which would have been the 30th, and they agree to that time. Now, when Sherry and Will arrive, they're met by an Ernesto Macaset, who is the supervisor of admissions, and he tells them that Shue's body is not there no more. It had been taken to the morgue. Now, here's the problem with that. State law requires a next of kin or someone close to the family to identify the body before it can leave the hospital. And Sherry knew this. And when she asked how his body was allowed to leave without verification, Ernesto says that the police came and verified his identity. Once they did this, they basically rushed him out of there on a Sunday, just 9 hours after his death, which is also very odd. Obtained through the Freedom of Information Act records show that the Queens County morgue actually denied admittance of the body 3 times before finally accepting it at 12:08 p.m. Now, if you don't know how strange this is for the police themselves to come and pick up a body that has supposedly no criminal case behind it and take it to the morgue, let me just tell you that it's super, super rare. I mean, it's almost unheard of. Later in a private conversation, one of Ernesto's colleagues, an administration professional named Linda Early, she told Sherry and Will that all hell broke loose in the hospital because the body was removed by the police without next of kin identification. Because one, it violated the hospital's policy, but foremost, it broke a state law. So they were freaking out. Did anyone ever get investigated for this, you might ask? Not one single person. Now, whoever is in on this obviously operates above the law. Shue's body was illegally removed from the hospital and was in the end cremated without any further investigation or anything. They got rid of the evidence. They got rid of the evidence. The last major find was the testimony of the medical examiner at the morgue, a Dr. Corinne Ambrose, and she flat out told Will Gallison that there was severe head trauma to Sunny's head. and she showed him a medical examiner sketch, and a large dark circle at the base of the skull in the back indicated where the wound would have been. Next to the drawing was a note that said 4 centimeters. And these are the facts in the death of Sunny Shue, guys. The really sad part is a few months later, after his death, his home was returned back to him, back to his name. No one knows how. No one knows who did it. It just reverted back to his name. This case was insane and just incredible, really. I mean, this sounds like the work of an organized crime syndicate, not the local law enforcement. And I'm not trashing cops. I know they put their lives on the line daily, and I know there are good men and women out there who serve every day, and I take my hat off to them. But in this case here, there's definitely some type of corruption going down. For the record, like I was saying earlier, not one single person was investigated. Not one from this case. And nobody besides Sunny's friends ever gave testimony as to what went down. If Sunny was making this whole thing up, wouldn't Judge Galea, who has passed away already, by the way, wouldn't he have come on record to say at least, hey, I had nothing to do with this. I'll take a lie detector. I'll do whatever I have to do to clear my name, but I had nothing to do with Sunny Shue's death. He never did. I mean, not even the FBI agent who promised that she was monitoring the situation. She never cared enough to go on the record or even give a damn response to the BSN News. Wouldn't even answer an email. So around this time of the show, we say what the local officials think happened. Well, this portion will be very short because they didn't say anything happened. Not once. They kept their mouths shut. And so, what do I say happened in this case? I think a persistent man annoyed the wrong person and a powerful person, and it cost him his life in the end. And I don't know what I expect to happen when I decided to cover this story. In some naive way, I guess some miracle would happen and Sunny would finally get justice. Maybe even perhaps someone involved in the case would hear this story somehow and be moved into action and step forward and come clean about what they know. I know all of this is highly unlikely. I don't know what to expect, and I probably shouldn't expect anything. I told Sunny's story because in the end, it deserves to be told. This is the Space City X-Files, and we'll see you on the next episode.